فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat for ta'ajil faraj sahib al-asr wa zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa. Tonight everybody can hear me, right? When it comes to the process of child rearing, there are certain things that are recommended to do for a child, and that if they aren't done for the child, it becomes recommended for the person to do for themselves. I'll give you an example. The aqiqah of a child when they're born. An aqiqah is something that is the sunnah of our Prophet that was done for Imam Hussain and Imam Hussain when they were born, and that on the 7th day a sheep should be slaughtered for the sake of sadaqah on behalf of the child. And there's a dua, a particular dua that's recited when this aqiqah is done, that says, "Oh Allah, the blood of this sheep for his blood, the flesh of the sheep for his flesh, that Allah take this sadaqah to protect this child," and that this is one of the mustahabbat, mu'akkida, yani emphasized to do when a child is born. If it should happen that aqiqah isn't done on our behalf when we're born, that when we get old enough, it's so recommended that you should have one done for yourself. Let's go out and have an animal slaughtered and its meat given away as sadaqah, as charity, and this dua recited. And you don't have to tell them, I'm 20, 30, 40, 50 years old when you do it. You just say, no, just aqiqah done for this name, because it's that emphasized to get it done. Similarly, there are other actions of building the identity of a Muslim that if our parents can, they do for us, and if they can't do, we should do for ourselves. One of those elements of building your identity as a Muslim is the ziyarat of the Ahlul Bayt. To go and to take the time to visit Karbala, Najaf, Sama, Raqqa, Athmain, Medina, Mashhad, Sham, to go and visit these places of the Ahlul Bayt. The reason being that in this country where we live as a minority, it's very hard to build confidence and identity until you see other people like you, not just every so often, but everywhere. Where, for example, when you go into the haram to pray, there is not that you have to bring your own turba, but there is so much turba that there is extra. To see people that when they are happy that they recite salawat, to see people when they are with each other that they are calling Ali and Muhammad, these things make a difference in the personality. Not unlike the fact that it's very important even for youth to see the ziyarat of Arba'in. If you want to see the akhlaq of the Shia, to see the akhlaq of Madhab Ja'fari, when you see all of these people gathered in one place, you see the generosity of behavior, you see the good character and demeanor, you see the safety and security that's possessed, that your property is safe, your energy is safe, the respect and honor that's given, whether you speak the same language or not. But it becomes an important element of the identity of an individual to realize, what are my values? Many times we absorb the values of the culture and the environment that we're in. But American values are not Islamic values. American values are take care of yourself first, then someone else. Islamic values are know that Allah loves the person who takes care of his brother, even if he means he gives away from himself, or sister for that matter. These elements, until you see them, you can't appreciate them. That what is the akhlaq and the culture that I should possess as a follower of Madhab Ja'fari? For that I have to see it, for that I have to go. An important element to remember in this conversation is that the Imam doesn't need us to go there. You can take the wasila of the Imam anywhere in this world, and you will receive the same wasila as if you were standing in front of the grave. We don't go to the ziyarat, we don't go to these places because the Imam needs us to be there. We go because we need to be there. That it impacts me. That standing in front of the Imam, it improves my connection with the Imam, who when I call and ask Allah by his wasila, my dua is fulfilled. So which is why these important elements are not because the Imam wants us to do this, but because we need to do this. One of the important things that happens, and unfortunately it happens to the women more than the men, is that sometimes you go for the ziyarat, you go up to the dhari, and you can't touch it. because the pressure is so much, the people are so much, you don't get the opportunity. But does the Imam need you to touch the dhari to acknowledge that you're there? No. Rather us, when we go to this location, we have to have a consciousness of how many people from what backgrounds, what cultures, what abilities are there. And someone who has less understanding doesn't think about this. They simply think, I need to touch this dhari. And they'll do anything to touch the dhari. But the person who's thoughtful acknowledges and says that me standing in front of my Imam, me being present here is not without his permission. He's acknowledged me. I've connected with him. Whether I touch the dhari or not, the Imam knows that I am present and I have built a connection. These elements of building that relationship with the Imam become very important to ensure that our generations stay on this path of Islam and develop the character we want them to have. So therefore, if we can as parents send our children, then we should and go with them. But if we can't, then we should go ourselves and promote our children to go as well too, that this is an important part of building that identity. And while we have the opportunity, we shouldn't miss it. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. These series of nights we've been talking about the relationship between Imam Hussain and Imam Zaman. One of the important questions is that when we claim the Imam is the authority of Allah on this earth, how far does the authority of the Imam extend? Meaning, what is subject to the authority of the Imam? We see, for example, that we know that Allah in the Quran, for example, Allah makes a statement and He says, يَوْمَ نَدْعُو كُلُّ أُنَاسٍ بِإِمَامِهِمْ, that there will come a day where every people will be raised on the Day of Judgment with their Imam. Which explains us the first fundamental, that every nation has an Imam that they will be raised with. There's an interesting aside here. Shall we take an aside really quick? All right, I know we're just getting started, but there's something that kind of tangents off. You guys are okay? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Usually this conversation comes up in death, but it's important to understand. Did you know Allah has a filing system for human beings? There's a filing system. And this is why paying attention to your usul-e-deen and to know and to believe in the concepts that you believe in is so important, because if you mess it up, you don't get a second chance. يَوْمَ نَدْعُو كُلُّ أُنَاسٍ بِإِمَامِهِمْ. Allah says on the Day of Judgment, we will call every people with their Imam. When was it decided who is your Imam? On the Day of Judgment, when you stand up, you're immediately called with your Imam. No one stands there and says to you, who's your Imam? Who do you want to go with? That's already been set. Which is why you'll notice there's two things that happen. One is that on the Day of Judgment, Allah doesn't ask you who is your Lord, who was your Prophet, who did you follow. Allah simply asks you about your deeds. He asks you, there are 50 stations on the Day of Judgment, and each one of these stations is about some action. And this is where our sixth Imam would explain. أول ما سئل به يوم القيامة الصلاة فإن قبلت قبلت ما سواه وإن ردت ردت ما سواه. Imam Sadiq explains, he says, on the Day of Judgment, the first thing you'll be asked about is your prayers. If your prayers are accepted, everything will be accepted after it. And if your prayers are not accepted, you didn't pray, nothing will be accepted. But these are all a'mal, these are deeds. The reality is that Allah has already decided who your Imam is. That question has already happened when you entered the grave. Munkar and Nakir, when they come to your grave, they don't ask you, Baba, did you pray? Did you fast? No, they ask you, who is your Lord? Who is your Prophet? Who is your Imam? What is your book? What was your Qibla? They ask you these questions to decide which group will you be raised with, who will be your Imam on the Day of Judgment. So that most difficult moment, which is why the moment of death is very difficult, because that's the transition from living this life and living comfortably here to all of a sudden going into this environment where now you're seeing angels, you're seeing the effect of shaitan, you're seeing all these different things, and someone is standing there asking you, what do you believe? Therefore, if you don't really believe it, if you really don't practice it in your life, if you really don't think about your aqeedah and what do you actually believe, that when those angels ask you in that moment of death and you can't answer them, you don't get a second chance. Wherever you're filed is where you'll stand up on the Day of Judgment, which is why Allah says on the Day of Judgment, every people will be called with their Imam. Not that you will decide who your Imam is then. The Imam is decided at the moment of death. That whatever you lived this life, that's what you'll start with. So we see one, the authority of the Imam extends over humanity. Every human being possesses an Imam. How far does this authority of the Imam extend? The second description talks about, for example, animals. Does it extend to animals? When we look at, for example, the hujjah of Allah, the authority of Allah, when Allah made the statement and said, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, I'm going to place on this earth my authority. He did not make it specific to say that this authority will only be for the human beings. Rather, the authority has the ability to be in charge of every animal, every living thing that's on this earth. Which is why we saw, for example, in Surah An-Naml, Nabi Sulaiman, when he's speaking to the ant, when he's speaking to the jinn, when he's speaking to the birds, all of these interactions show that the authority of Allah has authority on human beings, as well as having authority over the animals. When we look at, for example, in the lives of our A'immah alayhimus salam as well too, we see our eighth Imam. He's known as Zamine Ahu. This description tells you that that deer was something that would submit to the authority of the Imam. Which is why the story famously goes and says that a hunter who captured a deer pleaded with Imam Radha that let this hunter to let him go, let the deer go to feed its child and it would come back. And Imam Radha told the hunter, I guarantee that this deer will come back to you if you let it go, nurse its child, and then it'll come back. And sure enough, the hunter, doubting it but believing in the authority of the Imam, and he had no choice because the Imam was the leader of the people of the time. He was the successor to the Khalifa of the time. Let the deer go. But subject to the authority of Imam Radha, the deer came back and submitted itself to the hunter. And the hunter became surprised to say that, the authority of this Imam is so far that the animals listen to him. And therefore the Imam received the title of Zamine Ahu, the one who could even guarantee that a deer would come back. A deer, a wild animal. People were astounded by this. So the authority of the Imam, the authority of the hujjah of Allah on this earth includes people, includes animals, which is why the Anbiya would talk to animals, which is why the A'immah could speak to animals. One of the very famous stories is of when you go to Masjid Kufa. May Allah give us all tawfiq to go to Masjid Kufa. Is there something called Bab-e Thu'ban, is the gate in which you enter into Masjid Kufa by. This Bab-e Thu'ban is known as Bab-e Thu'ban. When you would ask people why is it called that, they said when Amir al-Mu'mineen was ruling in the city of Kufa, a giant serpent came into the masjid. A Thu'ban is a serpent, not a snake, not any snake, a serpent, a big one. It came in and it spoke with Amir al-Mu'mineen and then it left. And this showed that this was the authority of the Imam, that it extended at even these types of creatures. Now that creature happened to be a jinn that came to speak to the Imam. But the fact that the Imam could speak to him was one of the signs of the authority of the Ahlul Bayt. People and animals. What about things? Does the authority of the Imam extend over things? It does. And we saw examples of this, for example, in the life of our Prophet. He would pick up a stone and the stone would bear witness to the nabuwwat of our Prophet and the wilayat of Amir al-Mu'mineen. We saw this, for example, when we take a look and we see the hadith that someone comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen and says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, what is the attribute of a mu'min? How can you identify a mu'min? Amir al-Mu'mineen says, a mu'min is one who, if he tells this wall to become gold, it will become gold. Don't try it, and you don't want that embarrassment that it didn't turn gold. But Amir al-Mu'mineen says, this wall, a mu'min, if he tells it, it will turn to gold if the mu'min asks it to. The man looks at the wall and he says, Amir al-Mu'mineen, it turned to gold. You didn't even ask the wall to turn to gold and it turned to gold. Amir al-Mu'mineen replies, this is the difference between Amir al-Mu'mineen and a mu'min. That I don't even need to ask a wall and it will turn to gold if I command it to, without me commanding it to. The authority of the Imam extends over everything, which is why in Surah Yasin we recite, وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْسَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ, that everything is organized under the authority of an Imam. That there is an Imam over everything. Which brings us to the next question. How far does this imamat over things and people and animals extend? We say that Allah places authority on this earth. So we say that it extends over the earth. But what about space? This becomes an interesting discussion, and we'll discuss it intellectually first, and then we'll discuss it from the Quran. That does the authority of the Imam extend over space? When we look, for example, at the existence of the earth and the earth's ability to function, part of the elements that are necessary for the earth to function are, for example, the sun and the moon. Does the authority of the Imam then extend over the sun and over the moon? We see that for the earth to exist, and if Allah gave authority to Adam alayhi salam and placed a hujjah, and the hujjah has authority over the earth, and for the earth to operate it needs a sun and the heat of the sun, then either one, that the Imam or the hujjah of Allah is subject to the sun, that when the sun permits the hujjah will operate, or two, the hujjat of the Imam, when it's over the earth, it's over all of the ancillaries that are necessary for the earth to operate, which includes the sun. So we say yes, the authority of the hujjah of Allah, the authority of Allah, has to be over the sun as well too. And then we see, for example, the hadith that explains raddu shams, the turning back of the sun. It happens at one point in time that when Rasulullah would receive wahi, he would become very tired. And in the event of one of the excursions or battles, it happened that Rasulullah received wahi, and he became very weak and he needed to rest. Amir al-Mu'mineen took the responsibility to both protect the Prophet and keep the head of the Prophet in his lap. In this condition, the time for Salat of Dhuhr and Asr, because it was in a battlefield, Imam Ali had not prayed when he took the responsibility to protect the Prophet. Imam Ali prays by ishara, but by the time he prays and Rasulullah comes to consciousness, the time for Dhuhr and Asr has passed. He asks, "Oh Ali, did you pray?" He says, "I prayed by ishara." Rasulullah says, "I do not like that my wasi should pray by ishara in my protection." Rasulullah makes dua and the sun returns to its position. And Imam Ali offers his prayers in the normal way, that Allah gave him this permission in this process. And this is known as Hadith Raddu Shams. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Similarly with the moon. When it comes to the moon, we have that Surah Al-Qamar describes the impact of when the people came and questioned the Prophet that, "Are you truly the Prophet of Allah? If you are, we want to see that, can you split the moon?" And Surah Al-Qamar begins with the discussion that our Prophet split the moon because Allah gave him the permission to command it. This explains that the authority, the hujjah of Allah, has power over the sun and over the moon. The same way, because it is part of this process. Let's go further. What about something that is 4,000 light years away? Something that is 10,000 light years away? Something that exists in another galaxy? Can the authority of the Imam extend over this as well too? When we make the argument that, for example, that the necessity of the earth to operate the sun is needed, therefore the sun, because it is associated with man's authority on this earth, therefore the authority of Allah will have the authority over the sun, so is true of everything that exists within space. One of the things that we can prove scientifically and discuss scientifically is the concept of how when this earth and this universe was created, that it came from one centered, dense location and it split apart. We know this why? Because we see two things. We see one, the space that exists is constantly cooling and getting colder. And two, everything is getting farther away. When you can see something getting colder and farther away, you understand that at one point in time it was closer and hotter. And it describes and says that at one point in time it was in one dense hot ball and then it split apart. Allah describes this in the Quran as well too, that we saw the heavens and the earth were joined together and then we split them apart. This description of when this Big Bang that's called took place describes and says that material and matter then spread out. But it spread out on the basis of weight. So wherever the balance was, from immediately around it were heavy materials and heavy elements. And the farther away you went, the lighter the elements were that existed. Our earth exists in a very specific place in the creation of the universe, that the balance of elements that are present on this earth only exist on this earth because of its location in relationship to everything else in the universe. That everything that Allah created had to happen exactly as it did for this earth to exist. Many times you'll see the discussion that they describe and say that the earth in its orbit to the sun is very specific, and that had it moved a few inches closer to the sun, it would have been too hot on this earth. And had it moved a few inches farther away, it would have been too cold for life to exist on this earth. This entire solar system, this entire galaxy that we live in, fits into the same model. Had this galaxy been closer to the origination of where that universe began from and where things split apart, the elements that would be present would be too heavy, and elements like oxygen would not exist here. And if it was too far away from the center of where that took place, the heavy elements like the metals and the materials that are necessary for the earth to exist would have been too heavy for them to locate, and only the gases would have existed. We can see this in our old solar system, that certain planets are simply gas giants. They're a collection of gases, but they don't have any central material within them because of how they were formed. So meaning that the authority that Allah has given to the Imam extends over the entirety of everything that you can see in creation, because everything that was created was necessary to be created in exactly this fashion, or else this life on this earth would not have existed. Allah designed it in a very precise fashion. When we recognize this, the question then comes then, will we then be able to, or what was the point of creating these galaxies and these huge spaces when we can't exceed beyond the limits of this earth? Let's take a look at this intellectually first. That there was a time where man did not know that this side of the earth even existed. We didn't possess the ability to traverse through even water far enough to acknowledge all of what existed on this earth. And the development of man took time for us to be able to learn how to use these ships and to travel and to acknowledge all of the elements of the earth. Then we went from the process of using ships to being able to use planes. And then we made these nice little things that can fly around the earth and move around, which made us go back and think that maybe the earth is flat because it's so easy for us to get around now. These concepts of how man advanced in pieces and sections to be able to take advantage of the entirety of this universe, or entirety of this earth, tells us that with progression, man can utilize many different elements. And when we take a look and we see the hadith of the Ahlul Bayt, we see that our sixth Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam explains, and he says that man currently possesses 2 pieces of knowledge, and there are a total of 27 parts to knowledge. And that when the Imam of the time, when the Qa'im rises, that he will give us the other 25 pieces of knowledge that will open for us all of these doors of information and resources. To the extent where we can take a look in the Quran, that the Quran does not disagree with this concept. Rather, there are verses in the Quran where Allah makes and says, أَلَمْ تَرَوْا أَنَّ اللَّهَ سَخَّرَ لَكُم مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَأَسْبَغَ عَلَيْكُمْ نِعْمَهُ ظَاهِرَةً وَبَاطِنًا. Have you not seen, in Surah Luqman, verse number 20, Allah makes a statement, He says, have you not seen that Allah has made subservient to you whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in the earth, and He has lavished on you His blessings outward and inward. Meaning that we can look down, inward into the smallest of things, and outward into the scope of the largest of things. Allah says, I created all of this for you, O mankind. I gave you the ability to utilize it. Which is why we see, for example, in Surah Ar-Rahman, verse number 33, يَا مَعْشَرَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ إِنِ اسْتَطَعْتُمْ أَن تَنْفُضُوا مِنْ أَقْطَارِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ فَانْفُضُوا وَلَا تَنْفُضُونَ إِلَّا بِسُلْطَانٍ. O group, O men of jinn and O group of jinn and men, if you have power to pass beyond the zones of the heavens and the earth, then pass beyond them. But you shall never be able to pass beyond them except bis-sultan, with the authority, with extreme power, and having complete control over these elements. It's not impossible for us to be in charge of everything that exists and to traverse through the galaxies in space and to benefit from all the resources that are there. But we need to have the knowledge and the ability to do it. That knowledge and ability to traverse these distances and take advantage of everything that is under our authority is something that we will count on the teachings of the Imam to educate us and to open those doors of knowledge for us. When we talk about, for example, there's discussions that talk about the idea that in the dawah of our 12th Imam, that there will be no hunger, There will be no thirst. The narrations go even further, that in the dawr of the Imam, you will not need the light of the sun. The light of the Imam will be sufficient for all of humanity on this earth. Meaning that the aspects of knowledge that are available to us, we haven't even imagined yet. We begin to think sometimes when we read the riwayat about the dawr of the 12th Imam, that all of this will be miracles. But in truth, shall we take it aside for a second and talk about miracles? Everybody's okay? Or if you're tired, we can finish. We're all right? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The assumption of everything that we talk about that the Imam will do will be miracles. It's not right. As a matter of fact, a miracle is for a particular purpose of either one, defending and preserving and protecting the message of Islam, or proving the message of Islam and the existence of Allah. Outside of that, this is why we don't have narrations that, whenever the Imam wanted a pizza, he would reach into the future and pull one out. We don't have narrations that the Imam would regularly traverse across the earth in miraculous fashions and move from one place to another. The reason we don't have that is that the Imam only used the miracle. The Prophet only used the miracle to prove the religion, not for convenience, not for comfort, not for ease, but that it serves a particular purpose when a miracle is utilized. Which is why when we want to talk about the dawr of our 12th Imam, everything is not a miracle. Rather, the reality of science and technology that is present will be perfected in the process, that it will be, when we see the narrations, that the mu'min in the east will be able to see the one in the west. That the Imam will be able to speak to every mu'min, no matter where they exist in the world, that they'll be able to interact with them. It's not on the basis of a miracle, but that science and technology is usable. Sometimes people create this image in their mind that the dawr of the Imam will go backwards and society will move backwards in time and will go back to the most basic of elements, and that all of this technology will be destroyed. That's not the case. No, there's no problem, there's no difficulty of utilizing these resources. Which is why sometimes when we see some of these narrations, we can understand that how science and technology has made them possible. There's the narration of the 313 companions of the Imam, that when the Imam makes his announcement, that these 313 in the span of a night will gather with the Imam in the city of Medina. People used to wonder, Shlon, Kaif Yasir, Maisir. How is that possible? It'll be a miracle. How will 313 people who are spread around the world get to the Imam in the passage of one night? Today we call that a red-eye flight. You get on a plane and then the next day you're in present. But there was a time where this was considered impossible. There's no difficulty that this is utilized, that the Imam can speak to us with these tools and technology, and that technology will improve and become better for us to be able to be subservient to the Imam of our time. The authority of the Imam, when it extends over everything, it includes all of these elements and the ability to traverse and to benefit from things that as of yet man has not even imagined to be physically possible, that we simply guess at the reality of these things. The hujjiyat of the Imam, the authority of the Imam, is over everything and nothing is missing from it. Which is why when we pray for the coming of the Imam, when we ask for the coming of the Imam, in the aspect of that is also knowing and understanding how far his authority extends. There will be those amongst the mu'mineen who will refuse to accept the authority of the Imam, who will turn away from the Imam. We imagine many times that this is on the basis of, for example, ideology. It could be ideology. It could also be refusing to accept the authority of the Imam and what he presents to us and what he teaches us. Same way we have some people who refuse to use technology today. No, that's all bad. Get it away from me. But the authority of the Imam can use any of these elements and extend the possession and the authority of man, not just on this earth, but throughout space, because that is also when Allah says, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, that everything that exists in the material realm, the hujjah, the authority of Allah, has authority over all of it. And it can be beneficial. Now we said that these series of lectures is about the connection between our 12th Imam and Imam Hussain. We've understood now and we've talked about the authority of the hujjah of Allah is over all things, and how the Imam of our time will give us access to everything that exists in the material realm as well too. How does this connect him to the dawr of Imam Hussain? Well, when you look back into history, you see these narrations from the 11th of Muharram, from the 10th of Muharram, that people questioned. They didn't understand. Where they said, when Aba Abdullah was killed on this earth, people in Sham would find fresh blood under the stones of this earth. Karbala way, Sham way. They described and said that it was as if the heavens were bleeding, that the sky had turned red for 40 days, that the skies wept blood for Aba Abdullah, and the weeping of the sky was its turning red. How then, if we know that the authority of the Imam extends over everything material, can someone question that when the master of everything that existed was killed in the worst of ways, that it is not possible that the earth wept over him, that these elements that were present wept over the Imam, that there was blood that was present for people to see and acknowledge the bad thing, the worst thing that could have happened in humanity took place. Abdullah ibn Abbas narrates and he says that the night after Ashura, I saw in my dream that I saw Rasulullah, his hair was disheveled. He was in a state of discomfort. And I looked at him and I asked him, Ya Rasulullah, why do I see you this way? He says, they have killed my son Hussain. I am in the field of Karbala collecting the flesh and blood of my Hussain. And I have not yet completed separating my Hussain from the sands of Karbala. Oh, Abdullah ibn Abbas, if you would have understood how they killed Imam Hussain, that after that they stabbed him with swords, they hit him with spears, they shot him with arrows, they threw stones at him, they made my beloved Imam bleed in every way. Rasulullah is the one who says, I collected the pieces of my Hussain. This was not enough, that after this, when they ran over the chest of Aba Abdullah, they describe and say that we ran over Hussain in such a way that his back and his chest were mixed from how much the horses ran over him. This was the difficulty of that condition, that on the 11th of Muharram, when they took the Sibaya and the prisoners and they intended to leave, Umar Sa'ad Mal'un remained in the field of Karbala till the middle of the day, burying his soldiers, burying the ones who were killed from his army. But they left the bodies of Imam Hussain and his companions under the heat of the sun. Then they took the prisoners. Imam Zainul Abidin describes and he says, I was tied to the naked back of a camel, where they took chains and they put them around my neck, my wrists and my ankles to tie me to the back of this camel. Our women were placed on the backs of mules without having anything to protect them. And then they were tied to these animals. They describe when they had tied them in this fashion, they paraded them past the shuhada to cause pain to the Ahlul Bayt. The description writes and says 2 events took place. One, that as they passed the body of Abu Abdullah, Imam Zainul Abidin looked in a condition as if his soul was about to leave his body. Sayyidah Zainab asked him, oh nephew, why do I see you struggling between life and death? You are the remainder of Nabuwwat. It is my task to protect you. He says, oh aunt, how can a son look at his father in this condition and live through the experience? How unfortunate I am that I see my father mixed with the sands of Karbala and I can do nothing to offer him support. Sayyidah Zainab says, oh my nephew, be patient. Be patient. I have heard this from my father, that this difficulty will come and Allah will be the one to extract revenge on this event. Be patient through this. But they describe and say that after this, it was Sayyidah Zainab who threw herself from her mount and went to bid farewell to her brother. That they describe and say that Sayyidah Zainab comes to the body of Abu Abdullah and sits next to her brother and says, oh brother, I have never been parted from you, but now I must bid farewell to you. Oh brother, in our family is the tradition that when a sister leaves her brother, she kisses his cheeks. Oh my beloved Hussain, you have no cheeks for me to kiss. I shall bid farewell to you in a way that no sister has ever bid farewell to her brother. They describe and say that Sayyidah Zainab kissed the cut neck of Abu Abdullah in the field of Karbala and said, oh brother, I have kissed you where no one kissed you before. I have bid farewell to you as no one did. Brother, give your sister permission. And in this way, the sister bids farewell to Imam Hussain. They describe, I have read only two places where they said that Sayyidah Zainab threw herself from her mount. One is this instance in the field of Karbala, bearing farewell to Abu Abdullah. The second they describe in the distance between Kufa and Sham. There came a point where the head of Abu Abdullah, mounted on a spear, would fall from the spear and refuse to move forward. The Mal'uneen tried over and over again. They would mount the head of Imam Hussain on a spear. It would fall from the spear. Eventually they came to his son and said, "Oh, Ali ibn al-Hussein, your father's head refuses to move forward. What is wrong?" Imam Zainul Abidin replies, he says, "There was a small girl with us and she has been missing from our kafilah. That daughter of my father Ruqayya, until she is returned, he will not move on." Mal'un Shimar commanded, he said, "Go find this child." They describe and say Sayyidah Zainab again threw herself from the mount. She said, "Oh Mal'un, you torture our children. Do not touch my niece. I will go alone to find my niece." They describe and they say that Sayyidah Zainab turns and she says, "Oh brother, the land and the desert is vast. Sakina is very small. Where should I look for this little girl?" Imam Zainul Abidin says, "Aunt, look at the eyes of my father. In the direction you see him looking, you will find our sister." Sayyidah Zainab looks up at the head of Imam Hussein, heads in that direction. They describe and say that eventually she found a woman sitting with the Ruqayya in her lap. And in this moment she sits down and she says, "Oh lady, we are from a very generous household. We are not used to someone doing us a kindness and not compensating them. But today Zainab is very poor. I possess nothing. Lady, tell me your name. I will ask my mother to intercede on your behalf on the day of judgment. Tell me who you are, and I will make sure that my mother does not neglect this kindness you have done to us." As Sayyidah Zainab takes the child, the lady replies, "Oh my daughter Zainab, it is me, your mother Zahra. I have never left you in these difficulties. I have been in your company and assisted you every step of the way. Be patient in this trial. Your mother stays with you in all that you go through." ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. 10 times we call out together. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Mahmud بحق محمد يا أعلى بحق علي يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة يا محسن بحق الحسن Ya Qadim al-Ahsan bihaqq al-Hussain. Ya Allah, accept this small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, give the thawab of this majlis to our marhumin and all the mu'mineen who are in need of dua. Ya Allah, by the right of the tears in our eyes, we have gathered here with hajat. By the right of the majlis of Abu Abdullah and the Quran, fulfill our hajat. Oh Allah, those amongst our families and the mu'mineen who are suffering through sickness and disease, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Ya Allah, those who are suffering through strife, difficulty and insecurity, give aman to the mu'mineen and muslimeen wherever they are in this world. Oh Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Islam. Hasten the reappearance of Sahibul Zaman. Make us and our families from the supporters of Sahibul Zaman. And entitle us to the ziyarat of Abu Abdullah in this world and the shafa of Abu Abdullah in the hereafter. 1 Surah Fatiha, 3 times Surah Ikhlas. لأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات مع